Hello, and welcome. So Deepu doesn't know this, but I have a special surprise to start things out. We had a very special thing happen at Java 1. I went and nominated JHipster for a Duke's Choice Award, and I packed it all the way here.
Oh.
And so I brought this for Julian and Deepu, and it's pretty heavy, so I don't want to take it home, but we'll set it right on here. And you get to take it home, Julian. So congratulations to JHipster and you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so today we're going to talk about Angular and React. And we'd like to start off by asking a few questions, but first we'll introduce ourselves. Deepu?
On to the ring. Okay, I'm Deepu. I love JavaScript, so I would like to call myself a JavaScript evangelist. So I currently live in India. I'm originally from I currently live in Netherlands. I'm originally from India. I was going to do it otherwise. So I would like to call myself a programmer with a soldering iron because I'm originally an electrical engineer. I become a programmer accidentally, probably like most of you. I'm the co-lead of JHipster. It's a very popular Java development platform. I'm currently writing a book about it with Senthil Kumar, and it's available for pre-order from Preact. Check it out if you're interested. I work for Xebialabs. We build DevOps products. I was told that we are giving huge companies run for their money. I'm very honored to be here with Matt. I'm going to go all Undertaker on him.
So my name's Matt Raible. I'm a hick from the sticks. I grew up in the backwoods of Montana. No electricity, no running water. Had to use an outhouse. Had to wait for my dad to warm up the seat and stuff like that when I was a kid. I'm a web framework aficionado. I like web frameworks. I like to play with them all. I like open source. I've been doing open source and using open source for about 15 years now. I work for Okta as a developer advocate. Okta is a company that basically has authentication in the cloud or user management in the cloud. I love Volkswagens, buses, and vans. If you have a similar obsession with Volkswagens, I'd love to talk to you after. And I also am a Java hipster. I work on the Java hipster project as well. So what about you? We'd like to hear about the audience and what your experience is. So how many folks are Java developers? That's almost everyone, except for that guy. How many people consider themselves web developers? Okay, it's about 3/4 of the room. Who likes JavaScript? It's only half. Okay, like I asked that question 5 years ago at Devoxx, and it was like 10%, so we're doing better than that. How many people like TypeScript? Okay, it's a little more than JavaScript. Who's a fan of Angular? Yeah, baby. That's about half the room. How about React? Yeah, not as many. 25%. Okay. And any fans of Vue.js? It's another popular one. Okay, that's only like 10. And even though you put up 2, it only counts as 1. Okay, so how many people are Java hipsters? How many people have used JHipster? Just curious about that. Okay, there's only 10 or 15. Okay, good to know. So today's agenda, we'll be talking about the history of Angular and React, just to kind of show you how they came to be. And then we'll talk about learning them, give you a little hello world example with each. And we'll talk about our favorite and not so favorite features of each. And then we'll have the actual Smackdown, right? We plan on getting down and dirty there. And then we'll give you a bunch of statistics and pretty graphs that give some information about how the two compare. And then we'll finally give our recommendation at the end.
Okay, so before we start onto that, let's quickly see the rise of the so-called MV star frameworks. Here. So after 2010, there was a huge rise in MV star frameworks, or so-called MVVM frameworks, and before that, we all know that we use jQuery for pretty much everything.
Right.
So Dojo was, I think, the first one which kind of had a framework for building web apps and stuff like that, followed by Backbone and Knockout.js, but they didn't make it that big. But then came Angular, and it became like so popular. So client-side MVVM, became a thing. So Angular was released in 2010. React followed in 2013. So they are kind of huge now, and they kind of made SPAs and MEVMs the thing like that even Java developers started to do.
Right, and they became very popular, and they're still popular today, which is rare in JavaScript land, right? These things have been around for 17 years now. So, but what it's given rise to is what they call JavaScript fatigue. Right? There's a new framework. I got to go learn something new. But I think a lot of this really subsided in 2015. Like because of the rise of frameworks like Angular and React, they got popular enough and stabilized enough that people didn't feel like they needed to learn a new one. So I don't feel that this is really as true anymore, but let's see what you think. How many people feel a little bit of JavaScript fatigue? Too many frameworks. Okay, it's about half the room, so it's still there. So the history of Angular, it started out as AngularJS in 2009 by Miško Hevery, and basically he was working at Google, and I don't know if you know this, but he worked for a company that got bought by Google, and they had Angular as their way of building apps. And basically what happened was he had built this system which allowed you to actually build apps without any JavaScript at all. It was just meant to be an HTML framework that built apps, and JavaScript was the powering mechanism behind making it happen. So he was working on a project, and they're using GWT, also known as GWT, from Google, and it took 3 developers 6 months to develop it, and he was really frustrated with the process. He was probably frustrated with Java being the language of choice for everything. So he was like, I'm going to go and try it with my framework, and he did, and he was able to write everything by himself in 3 weeks that had taken 3 developers 6 months. So it was very successful out of the gate, at least for implementing what he wanted to implement. So the big thing that happened with AngularJS was it got super popular, and at its peak, the whole team said, hey, let's rewrite it, and let's not make it backwards compatible. We've known a few other frameworks in Java land that have done that. Tapestry is one. Struts did it, right, when they went to Struts 2, and we all know that's a terrible idea. Angular seems to be kind of surviving, but it often kills a framework when they actually do that and don't make it backwards compatible. So that happened in 2014, and then it took them 2 years to actually release Angular 2 last September. And then now we have Angular 5. We'll probably have Angular 6 in January next year. So don't call it Angular 2. Don't call it AngularJS. It's just Angular now. So with Angular, it's pretty easy to do hello world. With AngularJS, you would just basically have 10 lines in an HTML file. You'd have a script tag to pull everything in, and then you can manipulate things from there. Well, with Angular, it's basically you're using components, which is a decorator. You know it as an annotation in Java land, but it's a decorator in TypeScript. And the selector matches that HTML tag at the bottom, and then there's a template for your HTML, or you can point to a template URL to an external file, and then you have an export class app component. And that's just ES6. So there's nothing specific about TypeScript there. And then once you have that, you can load it with a module, and then you can actually bootstrap that module.
Man, it's like 3 files for Hello World.
I know. It's not as cool as AngularJS in that sense, but hey, you know what you do? Use Angular CLI, and it makes it a little easier, right? And Angular CLI gets you started. I do think it's kind of unfortunate that you need 10 to 15 files just to get started, but that's the way the world is with Angular nowadays.
So for React, it was originally created by Jordan Walk in 2011. And Facebook has been using it internally for a while, and then they decided to open source it in 2013, I think May. It was said that it was inspired by Angular as well as by XHP. It's a HTML components library for PHP. Within a year, it had huge sites, implementing it because of the performance gain on scale, which was promised by React and which was delivered by React, of course. So people like Khan Academy, New York Times, Airbnb, of course, Facebook, Instagram, they all started using it. And now, if you see, there are a lot of huge sites using React, including WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, and so on.
Right, and they've done a good job in their versioning, right? Because they're like, hey, we're version 16, so that means we're way better than Angular because we're way higher.
They jumped from 0.15 or point something to 15. Like it was.
Right. I think the most
was a
interesting thing, though, is Jordan, right? The guy who started, this is his Twitter profile. And if you actually search for him on Google Images, he's not there either. And you go to GitHub, he's got the same picture. But you go on Facebook and you can find him.
Yeah.
Right? So he's very anti-Google as far as I can tell.
Apparently, Jordan is not a function or an image.
Right.
So let's see a hello world with React. So basically, you import the libraries. Then you just say, hey, React DOM, render this for me on this element. That's it. Man, 7 lines.
Yeah.
There is a great video from Eric Vicente. If you want to start learning React, it's very good. So you can try that if you like.
So are you ready to rumble? All right. So we're kind of take the Smackdown term from the WWF in the U.S. I don't know. I asked Deepu about it, and he heard about it in India, so I assume that a lot of you folks have heard about it as well.
It was huge there.
Yeah, but it's also kind of fake.
Yeah, we realized that very late,
Right? It's these big guys, and it's entertainment. They actually made them rename it from WWF as a federation to entertainment, right? And so even though we're doing a Smackdown, we're not actually hoping to put each other down and actually, do that. So we hope to do a friendly comparison of techniques and see what you guys think as well. So we hope to take this little poll and this little sticker here, and I'm going to write on the back, and we'll see what you guys vote for, and then we'll see what we vote for, and hopefully at the end we'll come to some sort of conclusion. But we're not promising a conclusion. We're just promising that we'll have votes, and we'll see what the crowd thinks.
Do you know, as a kid, I used to believe that Undertaker had 9 lives.
Yeah?
Yeah. So let's talk about React versus Angular.
Okay, so we're going to get you to vote. You all ready? Your voting arms ready to go? Here we go. So the first thing we talked about was CLIs. You saw it with Angular. React has something similar with Create React App. It generates an app for you and allows you to get started with yarn start. Pretty easy. So with Angular CLI, you use ng-new app name. But this generates pretty big application. It's got tests. It's got external templates and stuff like that in it. With React, it's only got 3 dependencies in it. So of course it's faster and slimmer and smaller.
Of course it is. I mean, that's why the Create React app, if you use it, you get basic app, basic dependencies. But if you want more, there are some templates. Like if you want TypeScript, there's a template for TypeScript. But of course, it is not as powerful as the Angular CLI. It doesn't have all those cool generate component and stuff like that.
Right. You see that command at the bottom. You can use ng-generate, or you can just use G and generate components and services and pipes and stuff like that. So that's built into the tool. That's pretty slick. It also uses TypeScript by default. And if you want to do just ES6 JavaScript with Angular, good luck. Because there just isn't that much documentation out there how to do it. The only person that I know that's actually done it is Venkat. And you guys know that Venkat's amazing. And he probably had to learn that all on his own, right, instead of actually reading documentation to do it. So if you're going to do Angular, I recommend just sticking to TypeScript because it's well documented.
Yeah, for React, it is ES6 by default. But as I said, you can also do TypeScript. And they also have their own, Facebook's own flow, which syntactically it's very similar to TypeScript. So you can also use that on top of ES6 for static type checking.
But if you use minimal with Angular CLI, 225 lines of code, right? A lot less. So we kind of win there. But what do you have? You have that README file. They have a 1,500-line README file with Create React App. So
it's helpful. It's a README, man.
It's in a README. So it's documentation that developers are going to read, right? If it's anywhere else besides the README, probably not going to read me. But you'll read it in the README. So, but then we did some checking, right, with Lighthouse, which is a tool for Chrome that you can see what your progressive web app score. And progressive web apps are web apps that can work offline, right? They have service workers and stuff like that. So Angular didn't do so well. It actually doesn't have it built in by default. So it only gets like an 18 in development and a 36 in production versus Create React App has it in there by default.
It's supposed to be good because it's the official CLI.
Right. So with Angular CLI, you should know this. If you're using 1.5, which just came out last week, and you try to use the service worker stuff, you do npm install @Angular /service-worker, it actually will fail. because they made a critical mistake when they released the CLI that they forgot to actually upgrade the service worker dependency. So it'll say, hey, this doesn't work, so you have to do 1.0.0 beta 16. So now you know. So now we'd like to talk about our favorite Angular features. But at the same time, I just want to see from the crowd, so how many people like dependency injection? Okay, it's a good number. How many people like the Angular CLI? Okay, not as many, but still a good crowd. What about the generation of components or pipes or anything like that? Kind of use it a little bit. The directory layout and the structure of everything.
Not so many.
Okay. So I love the dependency injection as well. I love Angular CLI. Before the CLI, basically all the quick start guides that Google had were copy and paste 10 files and try to do this yourself. And they all use System.js. And even all the Angular seeds out there still use System.js. And we all know Webpack's better. Maybe a little more magical, but it works really well, and that's kind of the new hotness in JavaScript land. As a Java developer, the thing that really appealed to me, even with AngularJS, was like controllers and services and just the separation of concerns that way. Same thing with Angular 5 and above. Is you still have components, you still have services. It's kind of easy to test things, how to separate them. The two-way binding and TypeScript I've grown to love. And I think Ionic framework is pretty cool in the sense that you can take everything you know with TypeScript and Angular and produce mobile apps. The Webpack waiting is new and a little tough. It seems weird that my front end takes longer to compile than my back end. It was never that way before. Like, that's a new ball game. The searchability, Angular versus AngularJS. And all these stats we gather, right? Are we getting just Angular, or are we getting AngularJS included in that, since the name is so similar? And then, who went through the 2016 last year release candidates and tried to use those? So a few of us need to go and like have beers after and like, be happy that we made it through there, because that was so painful. They would break things between release candidates. You don't do that. You just call it a beta, and then you can break stuff, right? So that was definitely painful and not well done. And then the testing infrastructure. It's pretty verbose. Now that I've figured it out, it works okay, but mocking stuff and creating new providers and stuff can be a bit painful.
No, same for React. I mean, before I tell you what my favorite and not so favorite features are, any React fans or people who use React here? Okay, very few. I'm outnumbered, man.
You only got like 10.
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
15.
At least for those 10. How many of you like JSX?
None. Oh, we got 5.
Yeah, there are a few. Okay. How many of you like the one-way binding? Okay. How many of you like the state management of React with Redux and stuff like that? And not bad. So what I like or love about React is definitely like one-way binding. I like one-way binding most of the times. Virtual DOM, which is very good. Like it improves performance compared to Angular. This is a killer feature of React. JSX, most of the times it's good. It lets you do all your normal JavaScript stuff that you know. You don't have to learn any new expression language syntax or anything. You can do normal JavaScript. Flexibility. React is extremely flexible because it's just a small library. You can use it with whatever you want. So you can mix and match whatever you like. You can create your own framework and stuff like that. And it is component based, so everything is a component. You can compose them, you can use them together. It's possible in Angular as well, but React in React it's more natural. It's
and you have dumb components.
Sorry?
You have smart and dumb
smart
components.
and dumb components. So like dumb components doesn't have to know anything. They're so simple and they still work. Yeah. And I don't think in Angular you can do
everything in Angular is smart.
Yeah.
And there's no dumb components.
Yeah. And of course, React Native. I mean, there is nothing in Angular that can beat React Native.
Right, React Native is actually native, right? It's more so that it's not using Cordova or anything like that, so that's definitely pretty cool.
And things I don't like, one-way binding. I like one-way binding most of the time, but not when you are dealing with forms and stuff, because you have to write a binding yourself for everything, which is kind of annoying at sometimes. In Angular, it does it for you, so it works. So unless you run into performance issues, that's good. So here, of course, you have to do it yourself. And the dependency fatigue, since React doesn't offer much in terms of an entire framework, you have to choose your own parts for, say, routing, state management, and stuff like that. So when it comes to that, you have a hell lot of options, and that just causes fatigue. Like
it's a paradox of choice, right?
Yeah,
too many things.
Too many to choose. And JSX, it's a love-hate relationship. It's good most of the times, but not so good. Especially, say, stuff like commenting in JSX is like weird. So you are in a JavaScript file or like JSX file or whatever.
You can't just have a web designer that's used HTML actually working on it.
Yeah, you cannot do that. Like, so those are pain points as well. Like, and as I said, too many options for state management, like Redux, MobX, too many, and no official style guide. So that leads to people coming up with their own style guides and everyone doing like what they like and like stuff like that. Though there is a style guide from Airbnb which is pretty popular, but still there is no official style guide like the Angular guys have.
Right.
Which is cool, which keeps the community like in a uniform state, and it's easier for beginners to start understanding and working with something rather than finding a different way of implementation for everything and like getting confused. So that's a good thing about Angular, and that's a bad thing I don't like in React.
So there's this project called To Do MVC that you might have heard of, where they basically took a number of different JavaScript frameworks and implemented a simple to-do list. The reason for that was just to show you, with the 30 JavaScript frameworks that were popular in 2014 or 2013 through 15, how to do the different things and kind of compare them in lines of code and stuff like that. So that project actually hasn't been updated since January 2015. So I wouldn't recommend looking at it as a reference implementation for the various frameworks, especially since they still call Angular Angular 2, and there just hasn't been any commits on it for a while. So Hacker News PWA is the new to-do MVC, and they even say that on their site. So if you look at their implementations of Angular and React, you'll notice that interactive on emerging markets, which means slower networks, which means people like me when I'm on a 2G connection when I'm in Europe, I like Angular better because it renders in 6 seconds. Now, it's still not in 3 seconds, which is what you're supposed to render in, but it's faster than React by 0.2 seconds there.
Matt, I think you just picked the one which you liked. They also had this, which is React, of course, and it's faster than Angular.
And it does it in 3 seconds. So,
yeah. And they also have Preact, which is like React on steroids, which is technically API compatible.
I thought it was like React on a diet.
Yeah, depends on how you look at it. It's like a
diet and steroid, so it's like buff and it's skinny.
Yeah. That's what you want, right?
Right.
So it performs better and it's lighter.
So tell me about Preact versus React. Like, there was the licensing snafu, right?
Yeah, I think until React sorted out the licensing thing, many people who were not comfortable with the React license, they went for stuff like Preact or Inferno. There are so many frameworks out there which are like 99 or 100% API compatible with React. So they are like drop-in replacements for React. You can take a React code base and you can just find replace the imports, and mostly they work. So they're good, and Inferno and Preact are pretty popular, and they are still, I think, used, especially because they are lighter, because they don't have a lot of stuff that React does for compatibility with different browsers and edge cases. They don't do that, so they are slightly lighter, and for some use cases they are faster. So,
and for those that don't know, basically Facebook had a license for React up until about a month ago. That was pretty open, but if you did any patent infringement, then basically you couldn't sue them if you were using React. And so what they did is they came out with a blog post that said, hey, we're sticking by this. And then like a week later, they were like, never mind, MIT. And we believe that it was partly due to WordPress being like, okay, fine, we're not going to use React, we'll use something else. And WordPress runs a lot of the sites around the world.
They run more than half of the web, I guess.
Yep, so that kind of changed the mind of Facebook. So now it's MIT, all's good.
So before we go further, one thing that we have to keep in mind, when you compare React versus Angular, it's not a fair comparison, because Angular is a full-fledged MVVM framework, whereas React is just a view rendering library. It's just a V in the MVVM. So in order to compare them fairly, we have to consider React plus something like Redux and React Router, and call them React and Friends. So then it becomes a fair comparison. It's a point to Matt, so that he don't jump on me for that.
So what you're saying is Angular is awesome. It's got everything, right? So we're kind of winning there, but we haven't actually got to our points yet. So, so let's get the similarities out of the way. Angular and React are component-based. They're both client-side MVVM frameworks for building spas. single-page applications. Both support server-side rendering, which is becoming more and more popular. It's supported in Spring Boot for both Angular and React. And I think you can use Node on Nashorn if you want. But basically, the new Twitter mobile does it with React. And basically, what you're doing when you do server-side rendering is you just render that initial page, and then all the JavaScript interaction after it happens. And so server-side rendering is still faster than rendering, everything in the browser. So a lot of, companies that want to have fast SEO and fast sites are doing that. And I would encourage you to look into that as well. We're considering, maybe some options in JHipster to do that. I know you guys aren't, but I might do it. So both require a build tool like Webpack or System.js for optimal use. Both have comparable performance. There's certain things that you can do wrong in both of them. But they're both backed by big companies and used a lot within those companies. I think one of the big differences, I don't know if we have it on the next slide, is that Facebook uses it for its main site, right? Google doesn't really use Angular for its main site, but at the same time, there's not much on its main site.
But Google does use it for AdWords, which is one of their major money-making.
Right, it's their, they're an ad company, right? They both are, which is funny, right?
And finally, they are MIT licensed as well, both.
Yep.
Yeah. And one more thing is, sometimes both are like, pain in your, you know what?
Both are a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Can be. So it's time to vote. No, not yet.
Not enthusiastic enough.
So I couldn't find a pen, so I'll just use, since JHipster guy has an Angular tattoo, we'll do face up if it's Angular, and then we'll do face down if it's React.
Okay.
And then we'll have 5 across here. So technical differences, they have regular DOM in Angular, virtual DOM in React, JSX in React, HTML in Angular, dependency injection. So how many people like the Angular way of doing things? Okay, how many people like the React way of doing things? I'm going to win all these. I definitely won that one.
It's a biased crowd.
It's a biased crowd.
They're mostly
my
Java
favorite
developers,
kind of
I
crowd.
guess.
It's my favorite, the biased one. So with Angular, it uses not really JavaScript in HTML. It uses expression language in HTML, and you can do ternaries and stump stuff in there, but you're not going to actually have 2 curly braces and then write a JavaScript function in there or do anything like that. You're just going to have little expression. So if you're familiar with JSP, if you're coming from Java, you're probably pretty familiar with how that syntax works. And
in React, it follows HTML and JS, so that's called JSX. So you can pretty much write most of the JavaScript stuff within the JSX, which looks similar to HTML, but it's not actually HTML.
And it was very controversial when it first came out,
Yeah, it
right?
was controversial, and I think now everybody in the React community, they just accepted that, and it's, I think, except for the few pain points I noted, it's good most of the times because you can write
but
normal
it's like
JavaScript.
putting Java in your JSPs. Come on.
Yeah, but
Not quite?
yeah, it works. It works.
So regular DOM versus virtual DOM. The DOM. Nothing's quite crazy there.
Yeah.
TypeScript based.
Yeah. But on the virtual DOM, the virtual DOM, I think Vue also uses the same thing, and it makes them very fast when it comes to a huge page, like page loads, and like where you have a lot of components, which I think still is an issue with Angular, with the regular DOM. So
Right. But we have lazy loading, and we have ahead of time compiling, right? Because it is a big framework, we need to strip out all the stuff you're not using. So that's where AOT kind of comes in.
You don't need that in React.
And the state management, you can do one-way or two-way binding. Just depends on how you have, your ng model configured in your HTML page.
So it's a pain when it comes to state management in Redux because React, because React, by default doesn't give much in terms of state management. There is a basic state management, but to do something actual, proper in a actual app, you have to use something like Redux or MobX. And when it comes to that, then you again get this, 2 warring factions. Like within the React community, there is a faction who likes Redux. There is a faction who likes MobX, and then again they get a lot fragmented. So that's a pain when it comes to that. But in my experience, Redux works quite well. I haven't tried MobX myself, but Redux works quite well. And the philosophy of the flux pattern, it works quite well when you have a lot of state going on. And technically it performs better than having two-way binding and stuff like that.
Okay, we got 20 minutes left. We're going to have to zip through these if we
Yes.
want to do a JHipster demo. So philosophical differences. MVC framework versus view rendering library. Angular. Yes. React. You were closer, but I think I got that one too.
Can I get a draw for that? No?
No,
Okay.
maybe. I mean, you probably have more people than actually use React. Vote for that, so-
Object-oriented was functional.
Right?
No?
Object-oriented, Angular, functional, React. So
Yeah.
Angular is a very opinionated framework, promotes object-oriented design, and offers everything required to build an SPA.
Whereas React is just a view rendering library. I mean, it does promote functional approach, but you can do object-oriented as well. And it doesn't provide much options when it comes to other cool features like routing or whatever in Angular. But of course, there are a lot of libraries to do that, but you have to choose them yourself.
And isn't there this thing with React where, like, if it's developed by Facebook, it's gold?
Yeah, that as well.
That's kind of happening in the community.
React community seems to love everything from Facebook.
So usability, less flexible, Angular, more flexible, React. How many people like less flexible? Maybe I should have worded that differently. Okay, who likes more flexible?
Yeah.
Okay,
finally.
You win one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
often results in more code for the same task.
Yeah.
That can happen with Angular. So which one is easier to learn? For those of you that have raised your hands, how many people know both Angular and React? Okay, we have about 10 out of maybe 200. What would you say? Which one was easier to learn? You've learned both.
I learned both. Of course, compared to Angular 2, React was easier because React, the number of things you have to learn in React is less compared to Angular. But then again, with React, it's not just React. Then you have to learn, say, Redux,
Right.
Stuff like that. So yeah, I would say they are comparable.
Okay, let's ask this. We won't compare the two directly, but how many people that used Angular found it easy to learn or no Angular? Okay, how many people found React pretty easy to learn? Yeah, I won that one. I totally won that one. So which one has a better ecosystem? And for those of you who use them, it's pretty obvious. With Angular, there's ng Bootstrap. There's all these other projects that you can use to basically pull in functionality. And I think with AngularJS, it was bigger, right? It was a huge community. There was something for everything. And so that did hurt when they broke that. But still, there's still a lot out there. So if you're familiar with either one, if you're an Angular developer and you think the ecosystem's great, raise your hand. If you're a React developer and you think the ecosystem's awesome, raise your hand. You didn't get as many on that one.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's weird because technically the React ecosystem is huge compared to Angular.
Well, and what Deepu had on the slide earlier was that the ecosystem is not that big, right, for Angular. And I was like, what? It's huge, right? I've been an Angular developer for a while. And so I went and looked on NPM search and typed in Angular, and that was 17,395 packages,
But
right?
React,
That's huge.
Yeah, but React, there was 41,000 packages.
So almost 3 times as many. So they certainly do have a little bigger ecosystem there.
But Angular, of course, is easier to start because you don't have to choose all these things. You have everything packed. Whereas in React, it takes a bit more time to start. You have to choose all these additional components, libraries, Redux, and all those stuff, and then you have to decide. So yeah, Angular is better there, I guess.
So the best way to compare, though, is not to actually talk about these different points, but it's to look at some code.
Yeah. So we do have Angular support in React support in JHipster. So let's quickly.
You got, I think, mirror your displays, or you can do it that way.
Yeah, I could do that way. That's easier.
And so what we did is we basically took there's a React branch in JHipster. It's not merged into master right now, but if you wanted to check it out, you could go clone the project from GitHub, and then you check out jh-react, and then you run npm link in that directory. And if you do JHipster in another directory, then it'll actually create a React application in there, or it won't create a React application, but it'll give you the choice to create a React application. So that's what Deepu's doing here. We're just going to accept all the defaults. We're not going to explain what they are, but it's basically MySQL, H2, EHCache, Maven, all that kind of stuff, and then he's going to choose Angular 4 on one and React on another, and we'll kind of look at the differences between them. So we did this last night, and we put it on GitHub, so we'll give you links at the end. We also deployed it to Heroku, and so there are running instances out there that you can look at, and we'll just run it here locally, and then you'll be able to see like the actual code. We can dive into that as well. And the biggest reason we're using his laptop is, I don't know if any of you know this, but I have a MacBook Pro, pretty fast, and if you compare it to a top-of-the-line Linux laptop nowadays, it's not that fast. The way that these ones do Java and the way they do npm install, what I've seen comparing to Josh Long's laptop is his is 3 times faster than mine. So it's kind of one of those things that if you do this a lot, presentations and stuff, you might want to get a Linux box. So I have one ordered because they are a lot faster for this kind of stuff. And so what we did after we got these built is we brought them up and then we did Lighthouse testing on them, because what Lighthouse allows you to do, Lighthouse is a Chrome extension that you can install. It'll allow you to test for progressive web app support, it'll allow you to test for performance, and it'll allow you to test for accessibility. And then we thought about doing like Zap testing, Zap proxy from OWASP, but the problem with Zap testing is a lot of times it's server-side stuff. So we figured if there was anything in one, it would probably be in the other, and we didn't want to make JHipster look bad in case there was a bunch of stuff there. But at the same time, here's what the code looks like.
So this is the React app.tsx. So that's like the, so you have an entry point here, which kind of bootstraps everything. And then you have your main app.tsx, where you define your structure and stuff. So if you look at the same for Angular, it's still not finished.
Still going.
Yeah. So
it's got everything, though.
Yeah. Okay, it has more dependencies there. So I'm going to start this up. So
you could actually probably use the same backend for both, right? And just do darn
Yeah.
start different ones. Maybe? No? Because it proxies to 8080.
yeah, true. Yeah. Yeah, I could do that actually. But yeah, they run on the same port for browsing.
Right, you can
as
do
well.
them at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's quickly take a look at this. So, oh shit. Okay, I know what's wrong.
It worked yesterday. You
Yeah,
broke it?
but I do know what's wrong.
But just to warn you, if you don't choose internationalization with React right now, it actually looks like that.
Yeah.
So I brought that
I
up to
chose
Deepu last
something,
week,
but,
and he was like, no, just choose the default. Right? That's all we support right now. So there you go. He fixed it. What'd you do to fix it?
The local storage part, I think there is a bug in that, so which I need to fix yet. So yeah, so we have like home screen.
So you can see that
basic user management.
the React version is a little bit right-leaning, right? It's on the right side of the page, where Angular is a little left-leaning.
Yeah.
That's funny in the US, probably not so funny here. But
yeah, so we have some basic pages here. So this is pretty much
this is a React version,
React
right?
version. So
Yep.
let's quickly take a look at the Angular version because we don't have much time. So then we'll go into the comparison.
You might want to pull the one up on Heroku because that's still going there.
Yeah. So yeah, we could do that as well. So yeah, but I don't
So
have
it's
the link.
Devoxx-JH -Angular and then .herokuapp.com. Nope.
Nope. Nope.
Now we're going to have to look at our slides.
Did I?
Go to the last one there. Oh, we didn't put the deployment.
Yeah, we didn't
area.
put them in. Yeah, never mind. I'll just start it. Yeah. So I'm gonna shut this
It's almost
down.
done. Look at there.
Yeah, damn, this thing is still building.
So it's not my
So, see?
laptop. I did notice
But
this last
this
night.
was like lightning fast, so it must be Angular.
So when I was deploying to Heroku at like 3 in the morning, usually like JHipster apps, at least from the US, they take maybe a minute to start, so sometimes they
it's
won't
done.
start in time. But for some reason it was starting in like 20 seconds. And I swear it was the React app, but I was like, that shouldn't have anything to do with how fast a JHipster app starts, right? Spring Boot.
No, this was stuck on the Webpack build, so
That's what I don't like about it. It's Webpack, but that applies
I would
to
blame
both,
it on
right?
Angular. I would blame it on Angular.
You blame it on Webpack?
No, on Angular. That's the only difference.
That's only fair.
Yeah, so we have
So
the same in
this
Angular.
one's on the
as well.
left. It's got all the features, though, right? React doesn't quite have all the features, so we still have to add those.
Same stuff. I mean, we do have like user management, metrics, health, configuration, not audits, logs, API, and stuff like that.
So it's cool because you can look at the same app developed with the two different languages, kind of evaluate. So that's what we did. And we ran some tests so we can.
So what we want to show is they are almost identical, the generated apps. Now, when we see the comparison, you see like how they perform.
You'll see the differences in the performance, right? So like I said, we generated apps with both. We use JHipster because we're hip. And if you compared Angular CLI and create React app, there's just not much there. So we gathered statistics for performance, accessibility, and lines of code. And PWA scored both. So when React started, it didn't score very well at all. But I had some time yesterday, so I added PWA support to that branch. So they both get a 91. And basically the only way to get better is if you put it on HTTPS. So we just tested it locally. But if we could remember those Heroku URLs, you could test it there, and those are HTTPS. And what I've seen with JHipster is it gets 100. So we're doing it right as far as PWAs are concerned. The performance, we got a 75. And we had the 75 was like once in 15 tries. Most of the time it was 40. And we had the same thing with React, but one time we got 66. And so what we found was there must be something that Lighthouse is doing to talk to Google or something like that to get its information, because we're running everything locally, and we're on conference Wi-Fi or we're on hotel Wi-Fi, and it's really slow to happen. And that internet connection speed is affecting like the score. And so it does tell you in the report that it prints out like, don't really trust this, but this is what we think is happening. You should be okay, but don't trust us. So I think there is some communication going on in the back end. And if you're on a faster connection, then I think this would have been better. Accessibility, they both do well for accessibility. So if someone's using a screen reader, should be able to read it just fine and interact with it. Both have best practices. The lines of code, though, is a big difference, right? There's 3,000 less lines of code in the React version. I think that's partly due to the 126 TypeScript files versus 55. There's half as much.
Yeah, but still, it's also pretty large because we also have another library for that, which does a lot of utility stuff outside of this code. So
right. But there's also, one of the things that you mentioned was if you generate a new entity, we don't quite have the entity generator working for React, but still, when you create an Angular component, you'll have the component, you'll have a separate CSS file, and you'll have a separate HTML file.
So there are around like 13 files for an entity, whereas in React it's just 6 files. And when you even compare the code, it's like double the code for Angular compared to React.
So you could put the HTML from Angular into the component that is supported, but that's not how a lot of people do it, so we keep it outside of there.
Yeah.
And Angular has more tests.
Yeah, because I didn't write enough tests for React.
Right. So it's kind of unfair to compare those, and this slide is obviously out of place there. So
you saw the demo already, so let's move on.
So now we have a bunch of pretty graphs, and we don't want you to look into these too much because pretty graphs are pretty graphs, and they're just a survey of developers, and we know that sometimes these surveys can be biased or that stats can be biased, and they're not surveying everyone, and maybe not everyone's given proper answers. So it's just kind of fun to look at these and laugh for the most part. So popularity trends, this really doesn't tell you much except for sometime last year and maybe around Christmas, everyone stopped searching, and Google Trends. And but this is a cool site. So hotframeworks.com has a listing of top frameworks. So when you go here first, it has about 10 or 15 frameworks at the top, and you can toggle them so you get down to less ones. There's like ASP.NET, probably JSP is one. I don't know if Spring MVC is in there. But they're doing it wrong because Angular should be red and React should be purple. But you can see that obviously they think that React is a hot framework more so than Angular. GitHub stars. We believe that Facebook has an internal policy that whenever they release something, all the engineers have to go star the project because their projects always have the most stars. NPM downloads. React has a CI system at Facebook that downloads it every day, and so they have a lot more downloads.
Are you done with the excuses?
But everyone's using Angular on the web, but this is one of those ambiguous things that we don't know if it's Angular or AngularJS. It's just this libscore project says
You can
Angular.
never trust these comparisons when it comes to Angular because both at some point was called Angular. So
Right, and it was the most popular one at one point. The only reason people went to React is because they didn't want to wait for Angular 2.
yeah. Pretty much, at some point at least.
So in the U.S., if you search on Indeed.com, and I've asked friends that look for jobs, and they found a lot of them on Indeed.com, and so I went and just did this yesterday and said, okay, of the jobs in the U.S., who's hiring for React versus Angular, and I threw Polymer and Vue in there just for the heck of it. And there's a lot more companies hiring for Angular. Here in Belgium, there's 3 times more for Angular than for React. So in the U.S., it might be gaining more traction. Stack Overflow tags. Looks like most people are having problems with Angular.
Yay. It looks like trouble to me.
So who wins? We'll ask once more. This says Angular wins, right?
I thought
3 to 1.
I thought
This
there was
is React.
2 React.
You think
No?
this one? No.
There
I
was
don't
2
think so.
React. Come on, you're cheating.
You think we tied? I don't know.
Let's see who won.
Vue wins!
Yay! You're just kidding.
But they are winning, right? I mean, they are getting a lot of
It is
trajectory,
getting popular.
right?
It is getting popular.
And it also has a really small library, so it's being popular for mobile phones as well. But our recommendation is basically if you have a lot of state, React, Facebook is one of those, right? They're changing stuff all the time with their little icons and dates.
It's very
and
good
stuff.
if you want to go scale. Like if you have a really big, huge application, then React is better.
If you're familiar with how you structure a Java application, MVC framework does it. Angular makes a lot of sense. I think that's why it's been more popular in this community.
And if you're working at Facebook, don't go use Angular.
And if you work at Google, you should probably use Angular. If you work at Oracle, you're not allowed to use Angular. I know that for a fact. I work there. And if you like flexibility, React's probably going to help you a little more there.
And if you don't want that, if you want things to just work, go with Angular. If you don't want to choose and build your own framework, that's Angular.
You just recommended them build their own framework?
No, if you don't want to build their own framework,
Okay.
go Angular.
Right.
I said if you don't want to, don't build another framework, please.
Don't build another one,
yes,
please. And so we also looked at some other opinions out there. So these are recent. You can go read these blog posts, and they're very in-depth about the technical differences. There's one from Jans here about Angular versus React versus Vue. This was just published in August. And so I'd encourage you to go read that. We'll publish these slides, and we'll give you a link at the end where we'll publish them. And then Angular versus React, the deal breaker. So some good comparisons there. So we learned about the history of React and Angular. We saw how to do Hello World. It's definitely easier in React. But not all of you are doing Hello World. I mean, I'm an example programmer by trade, and so I get paid to do Hello World. But not everyone does. So maybe I should switch to React and start doing it more. We talked about similarities, differences, statistics. Often they're called lies, damn lies, and statistics, so we saw some of those. But really the skill here is not knowing React or Angular. It's the ability to learn and the ability to pick up on a new one. We both feel that these aren't too difficult to learn if you find the right learning resources. That React video that we showed you earlier, we didn't show you, but we pointed to, is a great resource where it's basically an hour, and after that you feel like you kind of know React. Angular's somewhat similar, and there's Pluralsight courses. There's courses on egghead.io that really show you how to do things. There's great tutorials out there. So we encourage you to not be afraid of a new framework creeping up on yours, but be more open-minded and be willing to learn from.
I myself was an Angular fanboy for like 8 months ago. I was doing the JHipster Angular 2 migration. I was a huge Angular 1 guy. Then I learned Angular 2, did the migration for that. Now I started learning React so that I can migrate JHipster to React. And then I found that they're quite similar in a lot of ways. They're quite different in a lot of ways, but they both have their values. It's not like one is always good and one is always bad. They both have their values. And I myself have used both Angular and React in production for actual real-world applications, and not Angular 2, Angular 1. It was very good, and now I am working on a production application with React, and so far it has been good, and I have seen Angular 2 applications production as well. So definitely depends on your use case. Don't choose the wrong tool for the use case. If you choose the right tool, it should be okay. I mean, if you have a very small application, even maybe choosing both Angular or React might not make sense. Maybe you should go with Vue, which is very light.
Right. There might not be a best tool. I think that's what we've all learned as developers is there's several, not just one. And so we have a BOF tonight for JHipster at 8 o'clock if you'd like to join us in BOF 1. We do have some T-shirts after if you'd like to come up. Our sample apps are up on GitHub there. We'll post this presentation to Speaker Deck. And if you want to contact us, you can get on us on our websites or on Twitter.
So there's a special discount on the JHipster book. If you are interested, you can check this out. We'll post the slides with this.
And I'm really excited that Deepu is actually writing a book now, because I have the JHipster mini book from InfoQ, which you can download for free online. But now he's not changing everything every 2 months. So this was released like 2 months ago, and it's still up to date. So now that he's writing one, he's a little, less feature happy. So thank you.